Donald Trump secures a victory, gets his 4th indictment, the final one that he needs to get reelected. That's exactly what he said when he posted about this on August 3rd, 2023, 8:42 in the morning. I think this was after the 3rd indictment. He said, I need one more indictment, just one, to ensure my election. And we also were sitting here saying, well, there's one coming. It's going to be the one in Georgia. And this one is probably the most insane of all of them. I know that the federal cases are a little more serious because we're dealing with more serious people in those cases and serious claims in a very problematic jurisdiction called DC. But this indictment is so broad. It covers 19 different people, 41 different counts, and it's going after basically everybody. This is who is encompassed from Big Fani's efforts. We see Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, John Eastman, the White House Chief of Staff, along with the Trump lawyer, Kenneth Chesebro, another lawyer, a Justice Department executive called Jeffrey Clark. Jenna Ellis was a lawyer on this case, another lawyer. Okay, so one lawyer, two lawyer, DOJ official, 3, 4, 5 lawyers, a campaign official in Mike, a GOP chairperson, an alternate elector, a pastor. Stephen Lee's a pastor. We have Harrison Floyd, who's a leader of Black Voices for Trump. We have this person who's a publicist. Her name is Trivian, a publicist tied to intimidation. Look at her. She looks like a criminal. Sidney Powell, another lawyer. Kathy Latham, an alternate elector. Scott Howell, tied to an election system breach, they say. Misty Hampton, a county supervisor, and another campaign lawyer. So we've got a bunch of lawyers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At least 7 lawyers on this case. All of whom they're saying are now criminals, which is just incredible. So charged in the Georgia case, they list them all there, and we are going to go through the indictment and see how absolutely insane this is. So here it is. Donald Trump's 4th indictment from Big Fani Willis in Georgia, filed out of the Fulton County Superior Court, August 14th. The clerk signs off on it, and you see all the different charges. Now, all of these we'll go through in a little bit more detail, but there's a bunch of them. The big defendant here, Donald Trump. Some of the others who stand out, of course, we've got Giuliani there. We know we've heard of John Eastman, the lawyer. Anna Ellis is there. She's on Twitter. And we've got Sidney Powell, somebody we talked a lot about her filings and lawsuits here. Bunch of charges: conspiracy, forgery, conspiracy to commit forgery, false statements in writings, conspiracy to commit false statements in writings. You see how this works? So the underlying offense and then the conspiracy to do the offense. And these are also very duplicative. So it's the main charge, the main Georgia charge, the RICO, and then all of the other crimes underneath with the predicate acts which justify the charges. So it's solicitation. Asking somebody to do something is soliciting it. If you wrote something, crime. False statement and writing. You wrote it, crime. Wrote it, crime. Asking, crime. Asking, crime. Wrote it, crime. Impersonating a public officer. That's going to be a false elector, alternate elector. Then you get conspiracy to commit the thing. Okay, so it's like 2 charges for every act. It's the act and then the conspiracy to do the act. Same thing. Forgery and conspiracy to commit forgery. False statements, conspiracy to commit false statements. Same thing with documents, same thing with forgery, same thing with false statements. And then we've got different criminal attempts to influence witnesses and violations along with more writings. All right, signed here by the grand jury foreperson. And my understanding is that in Georgia, they actually do release the names of the jurors who were a part of this. And I've seen conflicting stories about it, but Fani Willis is the DA who is the person who spearheaded this whole thing. And some question about this, but my understanding is that they actually do publish their names. And so this was what was included in the indictment. There was some issue with this. People were saying that's not normal, but they were published. So that is still being contested, I believe. But they published it, so presuming that they did what they're supposed to do. The grand jurors on count 1 do hereby charge and accuse all of the people, all 19 of them, in violation of the RICO Act. What is this one? The overarching umbrella charge. They say that on and between Election Day, November 4th, and the 15th of September, 2022. That's a long time ago. That's almost a full year ago. So that's when the final date of the violation, the conduct was. Why didn't they bring charges within 6 months? That would have put us back in, they should have brought charges immediately in September. Why didn't they bring charges in October or November of 2022? Why are we now in August? While associated, unlawfully conspired and endeavored to participate in racketeering activity. And that's basically 2 or more people doing a thing. So here's the introduction. Fani writes, Trump lost the presidential election in November. That's debatable. One of the states he lost was Georgia. Also debatable. Trump and the other defendants charged in this indictment refused to accept that he lost. They knowingly and willfully joined a conspiracy, all of those other 18 people, to unlawfully change the outcome for Trump. It contained a common plan or purpose, conspiracy language, to commit 2 or more acts of racketeering in Georgia. At all times, they say all of these people unlawfully conspired, you know the names. What did they do? They did a bunch of stuff. And what they did constituted a criminal organization that brings this under RICO, whose members and associates engaged in various criminal activities. False statements, writing, influences, witnesses, computer theft, computer trespass, invasion invasion of privacy, and conspiracy to defraud, including theft and perjury. My goodness, this is pretty crazy behavior. This is like gangster. All right, let's see. Theft, perjury, trespass. The criminal organization constituted an enterprise under RICO law, and they operated all over the place. Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Mexico, blah, blah, blah. They say, here are some of the manners and methods that they use. False statements. They would say members of this enterprise, this conspiracy, included several defendants. They showed up in hearings in Georgia, and they made false statements about the election, and they wanted to persuade, you see that, persuade Georgia legislators to reject the lawful electoral votes. And you can make the argument that, well, if the executive, remember, the way that these elections are supposed to be structured is the state legislature, an independent branch of the government, sets the rules of the election. Oftentimes, the legislature delegates that over to the executive branch so that the Secretary of State and the people who govern the elections in the executive branch who actually conduct the elections can have some decision making and some changes. But when the executive branch usurps the power of the legislative branch, then there's an argument that the legislative branch can say, hey, we never gave you permission to do those things. No thanks. And you did a bunch of things that we think are problematic. And so because we have the power to govern elections, we are going to reassert our authority as a separate but equal branch of government and propose and nominate alternate slates of electors in a legitimate fashion. They're calling those people now felons, those people who were involved in that process. Members of the enterprise corruptly solicited Georgia legislatures instead to unlawfully appoint their own electors. All illegal. They say that there were false statements made to solicit high-ranking officials to do some things. Several defendants made false statements to Georgia officials, asking them to violate their oath, saying that they created and sent false documents, false electoral college votes, got sent in to the archivist and the Secretary of State. So these felony criminals were sending in their crimes to the Secretary of State. They said, hey, just so you know, we're stealing the election from Georgia. Here are alternative electors. Here you go. Can't wait for you to charge me with the felony. Or not. Or they were engaged in a legitimate process that happens in this country. The false documents were intended to disrupt, they say. They also harassed and intimidated election worker. This guy, Ruby Freeman, falsely accused Ruby Freeman of committing election crimes, and other people harassed her, and therefore what they've done is illegal. Their false statements is illegal. They solicited DOJ officials. In one instance, they say Donald Trump told the acting attorney general to, quote, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. And I'm wondering if that's in Georgia or, so we'll continue on. Soliciting of the vice president. They say that Trump also asked Mike Pence to do some stuff, and that members of this defendant class unlawfully access secure voting equipment. Now, we're going to see more about what these various acts are. There was obstructive acts. They said that they filed false documents, made false statements, committed perjury, so a bunch of process crimes. And these are the acts, all right? So that is the general nature of the allegations. Obstruction, unlawful breach of election equipment. So they say they stole data and ballot images. Now we're going to see, is this when they inspected them? When they were invited to inspect them? Or was this they hacked into their systems and stole the data? Here are the acts. So dumb. All right, on the 4th day of November, Donald Trump made a speech and he falsely declared victory. So that's an act. He gave a speech that says, I won. All right, any other Democrats ever done that? I wonder if they're going to get indicted. Here, 4 days earlier, they wrote a contingency speech. Donald Trump discussed a draft speech with an unindicted co-conspirator, don't know who that is, whose identity is known, that falsely declared victory and claimed voter fraud. So they had an alternative speech if they lost. So they had a conversation about what to say if they win and what to say if they lose. They say that's an act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Guess what? Every other political candidate in America has those things happen. They have questions and conversations about it. And guess what? If you're going to lose an election by guess what? Voter fraud, if that's a legitimate thing, then you can claim that. You can come out and say the other side stole the election from me. How did they do it? Voter fraud. But now that is, I guess, illegal, and it's a conspiracy to say that. If you lose, you're not allowed to say that anymore. If you come out and say, or even have a speech about that and say, hey, the only reason we lost this election, I'm going to come out and say is they stole it from us. Conspiracy, illegal. Rudy Giuliani called somebody, left a voicemail. The telephone call was about fraud in Georgia. That phone call is an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Giuliani called somebody, left a voicemail. Illegal. I've never seen anything so egregious, frankly. Rudy, you should be ashamed of yourself. Here we have another one. Rudy and Sydney and Jenna, what did they do? Oh my gosh, they showed up at a press conference. And they made false statements. They were conspiring and violating RICO. Here's the 4th act. Somebody named David James sent an email, stated that a bail bondsman has been looking into the election on behalf of the president. So looking into the election, an overt act. All right, here's another one. We got Donald Trump and Mark Meadows. They met with the majority leader of Michigan. I don't know what we're talking about Michigan for. This is Georgia. They made false statements in Michigan. And Rudy Giuliani was on the phone. Conspiracy. Mark Meadows, chief of staff, he sent a text message. Oh my gosh. flesh. It must say like, we're going to steal the country, right? No, it says, can you send me the number for the speaker and the leader of the Pennsylvania legislature? POTUS wants to chat with them. Illegal, in furtherance of the conspiracy. Felony text messages. Another one from Trump and Giuliani. They placed a phone call to Arizona. Shout out to Arizona. They had a call with Rusty Bowers. They made false statements to him and they solicited him to join them. And he said, no, I'm not going to break my oath. That was another act, another phone call. Rudy, Jenna Ellis, they showed up in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump joined the meeting by telephone, made false statements of fraud, and those were overt acts. So this is just standard post-election response stuff, just showing up and just contesting an election. It's all totally legitimate, or it used to be in this country. Here's another one with Rudy, Jenna, and Trump. They invited a group of the Pennsylvania legislatures to meet with them at the White House. Overt acts. Rudy and Jenna called Pennsylvania. Overt act. Rudy called Pennsylvania. Again, these are all in Pennsylvania. So it's like, what are we talking about? We're in Georgia right now. Mind your business, Fani. Another Pennsylvania phone call. They placed a phone. Pennsylvania, another one. Act 14. Pennsylvania, Act 15. 15's Pennsylvania. This one's in Arizona with, okay, fine. This is, you have a Georgia case. This one, finally, Act 18. This person, Michael Roman, coordinated with Georgia. Now we have Trump and Mark Meadows. They asked that this guy, John McEntee, create a memo for outlining what we can do for January 6th. Yeah, you can do legal research. The strategy included having Mike Pence only count half the votes. They say that was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. This is called legal research and preparing your legal claims. This is another one from Phoenix, Arizona, which I think is just way outside the scope. This is not a federal investigation. Why is she spending all this time in Michigan and Arizona? Act 22, we get another one. Finally, we're back in Georgia. On the 3rd day of December, Donald Trump caused to be tweeted. He said, Georgia hearings now on One America News Network. Amazing. That is an act in furtherance of a conspiracy. Trump tweeting to watch the TV, turn the hearings on. Illegal act in furtherance of a conspiracy under Fani Willis. Here's another one. Solicitation of people in Georgia. This one's actually in Georgia to do something. In a Georgia Senate hearing, Rudy Giuliani showed up and presented evidence. They say that at least 96,000 ballots were counted, despite being no record of those being returned. And they talked about the Dominion system and that those statements were in furtherance of the conspiracy. So here are the other false statements. So when they were in front of the Georgia Senate, Rudy, or this guy actually, Ray Stallings, made false statements. So he gave all these facts. These felons voted. These number of underage people voted. These people were not listed as registered to vote. These people illegally registered using a certain address, all in furtherance of the conspiracy. Another illegal Trump Twitter. Wow, blockbuster testimony taking place right now in Georgia. Ballot stuffing by Dems when Republicans were forced to leave the large counting room. Plenty more coming. But this alone leads to an easy win of the state. Illegal. Another illegal tweet. People in Georgia got caught cold bringing in massive numbers of ballots and putting them in voting machines. Great job, Brian Kemp. Illegal. Again, we go back to Pennsylvania before coming back to Georgia. Trump called the president pro tem of the Senate in Georgia. That phone call was illegal. Trump also called Governor Brian Kemp and solicited and importuned Kemp call a special session. Illegal. Trump posted another illegal tweet. Gee, what a surprise. Has anyone been informed, so-called Governor Brian Kemp? They could easily solve this, but they didn't. Sidney Powell also entered in with an agreement to assess some data. Sidney Powell's being charged unlawfully breaching equipment in furtherance of the conspiracy. John Eastman got charged for working with Georgia. Here's another one with a Georgia senator. Another one with the Georgia House of Representatives. How many different acts are there? We've got a Rudy Giuliani tweet. It's phone calls. And here we go. We're getting closer to January 6th now, but this is not in really her jurisdiction. They say on January 5th, Trump met with Vice President Pence, and they told Pence that he had the power to decertify the election. When Pence stated it was his duty to support and defend the Constitution, Trump stated that Pence was doing a great disservice. Okay, so these people are calling each other. Again, they're calling each other. Trump says to Pence, you got to be tough tomorrow. This is all happening, I imagine, outside of the jurisdiction of Georgia. They say the unindicted co-conspirator, they were transmitting all of the data that was copied, and Sidney Powell let it. More solicitation charges. So it's basically everything that they think was a problem. Look at all of these acts. Oh my gosh. And then we get all the various counts. In conclusion, wrapped up by Fani Willis. She's going to get this thing prosecuted in 6 months for 41 counts. This is one of the most insane things you've ever seen. This is so overbroad. They are covering up perfectly legal conduct, making it now illegal. And they're going after conduct in multiple different states that are not even within her jurisdiction. She's using RICO against a former president that is involving a whole slew of lawyers with 19 defendants, co-defendants, and she's going to get all this done in 6 months. What this leads me to believe is that this is not a serious thing at all. This is not a serious prosecution. This is just throwing a bunch of garbage at the wall to make it stick. And some of it will, because it's 98 pages of it, and it encompasses everybody. And so whether or not this thing actually goes to trial or Trump is convicted convicted, or if Trump might be convicted and appeal and win. That's not the point of this. This is just a big, disgusting mess that they dropped on this entire group of people to bog them down, to slow things down and muddy the waters up. I don't think she's serious about getting actual convictions as much as she is, which she may, but she's more interested in just stalling the Trump effort by dragging him and everybody else who's associated with him through the mud. So it's going to be interesting to see what the judge does. I have no faith that this is going to be done in 6 months. Trump is issuing a response. He says, a large, complex, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud which took place in Georgia is almost complete and will be presented by Trump, at a major news conference at 11 a.m. on Monday of next week, Bedminster, New Jersey. Based on the results of this conclusive report, all charges should be dropped against me and others. They never went after those that rigged the election. They only went after those that fought to find the people who rigged the election. So we'll see what his report says. Now, I don't think that even if Trump came out with 100% concrete proof that the election was in fact stolen out of Georgia, that it would change anything. This is not about the law. This is not about justice. It's about dragging Trump through the mud with 19 defendants and 41 counts.